Good morning, OKN. 7:48. Happy Wednesday to you. You know, it's you thought it was a normal day, but now you got to prepare. It might be time to go to the grocery. You got to get your milk. You got to get your bread.
Your eggs.
And your eggs, because we might be on lockdown. I don't know. I don't know what the future holds, but someone who can predict the future, Chase Myers, WSIC Meteorologist, joins us this morning. How you doing, sir?
Morning, everybody. How are we?
Preparing. I'm planning my grocery trip. Don't know. Can I just go to the regular supermarket, or do I need to make it a Costco trip?
Well, let's put some things in place here first. Before the break, you said, quote, ripping and roaring, and now you're telling people to go get their groceries. So let's put the halt on that.
I just want the people to be prepared, Chase.
I appreciate your preparedness. Now let's talk about Aaron, because it seems to be the talk of social media, and it seems to be the water cooler talk right now, because it is going to be likely our first hurricane of the season so far. And Mamie, I know you were talking earlier about trying to get the date for hurricane season. It's June 1st through November 30th.
There you go.
And that's just what we use on the calendar, right?
That's a long time.
Arbitrary. Yeah, it is. And there's a lot of discussion, actually. We can get into this in another discussion, but there's a lot of talk about possibly extending hurricane season, because really, as we know, the tropics and weather do not abide by whatever we have on the calendar. And this is the first year in a few that we actually haven't had any tropical storms or named storms in the Atlantic before the actual start of season. We had some April named storms, some May named storms in the last few years. So there's a lot of talk about whether or not we should extend it or change the dates. None of that really matters in regards to what's happening with Aaron. But it's a tropical wave that came off Africa. You know, usually this time of the year, when we get into August and get into September and October, we have that warmer water out over the middle Atlantic. And so this started as a little disturbance. And when we say disturbance, what we mean is basically a cluster of thunderstorms. And that really is what a tropical storm or a hurricane is. It's just one big cluster of storms that all work and rotate in sync sort of around each other. So with Aaron, there was a lot of talk in the last couple of days about how quickly this thing was going to become a hurricane. But we also had to put pause on that, because really, over the last 24 to 48 hours, Aaron hasn't done very much. And if you look at it on satellite right now, it's a very ragged, disorganized, chopped up cluster of storms. And part of the reason for that is the water temperature where it is right now is marginal, right? We want it to really be around 80 plus degrees to have really ripe conditions for thunderstorm and tropical storm development. So the water temperature has kind of been meh so far. And it's also been battling not only some high wind shear and some dry air. And when we say wind shear, you may say, well, don't tropical storms have a lot of wind? Yes, they create their own wind. But when a system is running into harsh winds, it actually blows the tops of the thunderstorms away. And so that's how it kind of feeds off itself. And so if there's nothing for it to feed off of, then it doesn't really do any strengthening. So that's been one piece of the puzzle for Aaron. And then we talk about dry air, and we talk about Saharan dust, right? That sounds, Saharan dust. And that really is what it is. It's just dust that's blowing off the Saharan desert. And any kind of dry air, any kind of dust, sand, dirt, anything like that is also kind of a death sentence to a hurricane or a tropical storm. So that's why we haven't seen much intensification in the last few days. Now, as we go toward the weekend, it is going to be running into an environment with warmer wind, with warmer water, less wind, less dry air, and we will likely see it strengthen. It likely becomes a hurricane before the weekend. I think over the weekend, it likely becomes a major hurricane. So we're talking about Category 3 plus. After that, general consensus is that it's going to turn before it gets too close to the coast. Again, anything can happen. That's still 5, 6, 7 days out before it ever even reaches that point. So to have somebody say, well, this is definitely where it's going, or you need to prep now along the East Coast, we should press pause on that for now. I do think it's going to turn, at least just the way our weather setup is. But, you know, it may come close enough to the Carolina coast where there's almost without a doubt going to be some really rough rip currents there early next week, maybe even some high surf along the southeast coast. Exactly where that's going to play out, we don't really know yet. So there's a lot of unknowns, but a lot of things that we can kind of take solace in knowing that a major Category 3 storm is likely, at least at this point, the way it looks, not headed for us. That can change, but I just don't see it right now.
Chase, I want to go back to the beginning. You said that a lot of these things start in Africa. Is it just some little girl blowing a dandelion and it catches a rip, and then all of a sudden it's just heading across the Atlantic? I'm still trying to get that origin story right.
Sometimes I really like to I really like to jump into your head and find out these pictures of what you imagine are happening and kind of how that plays out in a scenario in your head.
You should sit across the table from him every day, Chase.
No, I don't think it starts with dandelions, but it does start with clouds. So if a cloud, it can just be a little baby cloud pops up out over Africa, and with easterly winds blowing it off the coast, once it gets out over water, if again, I know we were relearning the water cycle a few minutes ago.
Mm-hmm.
If that water cycle does continue to happen, then that cloud can grow. It can become a storm. There can be more of those, but that really is how it starts, with just one little, I would call it just like a little seed. That little cloud is almost like a seed.
Is there any, because a lot of people look to the records, you know what I mean, like record heat, record rain, record hurricanes. This is a reverse record year?
Say that again. I just want to make sure.
What's the reverse record?
Is this a non-record year then? Because it's so
year.
late in the year that this stuff is coming out now. Like these hurricanes are kind of, and this is the first one, right? Like, and it's already mid-August, so it seems like somebody's behind. Did somebody sleep in, or what's the deal?
Well, think about this. Now we're already down to the E-named storm, right? So if we've had A, B, C, and D so far. Most of those were way out in the Atlantic and kind of lackluster, but also think about, we had Chantal back in July, early July, right at the weekend after the weekend of the 4th, actually. And that brought a lot of flooding down into eastern North Carolina and places along the coast. So that was just a quick spin-up tropical storm. So that was the C-named storm in July. I mean, it's not out of the ordinary to have a couple of those, or it's not it's not crazy for it to be quiet during those early summer months. Think about this, too. As we go through the summer, right, the water heats up. So water has a high heat capacity, meaning it warms up slowly and cools down slowly. So even after we move past the hottest time of the summer, as we're starting to do, the water now is just finally getting to that point where it really is ripe for hurricanes. And that means not just here off the Carolina or South Carolina coast. That means out all the way across the middle Atlantic, all the way over to Africa. So it takes a little while for that water to warm up. So to not see anything yet isn't crazy. And, of course, the outlook is expected it to be at least an above-average hurricane season. Now, I'm also one of those people, I'm like, well, every year it says it's going to be above-average hurricane season, it seems like. So, to say we haven't had anything yet, I mean, it's not record-breaking. It's not out of the ordinary. It's just typically how it goes because of really how the ocean heats up and cools down.
You obviously heard our chat about the water cycle there.
Yeah.
And you're connected across the entire state. So I want people to know that too from your perspective. Do you know anything about data centers or anything like that? I know you're a meteorologist, but do you know anything about data centers and water consumption or anything? Have you seen any of that stuff? Like how much water these things consume?
Well, it was interesting. You were talking about Lake Norman in the sense, and it was a really good point about, the lake really wasn't created for us to go boating on and have fun on. The lake was created for power, right? And so if they need to cool those power plants down, they run the water through them. A lot are hydro centers. I boat a lot over on Baden Lake, of course, which eventually connects and then flows into Norman. But they dropped it, I would say, a good 3 feet a couple of weeks ago, just because of the heat and to get some more water into those hydro plants to create more power. It's a cooler way, it's a more efficient way to create power. So, there is some truth to that. And I think Mamie had mentioned, was it you talking about the cloud seeding thing? Did you mention that?
Yes.
Okay. So there is, we're in that point now where, knowledge is power, right? You can get so much information off the internet, and what people read, what you read, we have to be careful of. So cloud seeding is a thing. But it is highly regulated, and it's not one of these things where they're seeding clouds to make it, constantly rain like it has the last couple of weeks.
I was going to say, is that why it's raining so much? People are just throwing seeds in the air?
That's Jesus seeds.
That's not a product of cloud seeding, no. But there is some cloud seeding done in places that are really, really dry and arid. And it's not done in a sense to create rain or to create clouds. It's done in places where it's already raining to help, I guess, extract a little more moisture out of those clouds. And it's not one of those things where it's going to change getting, a drop of rain versus 2 inches of rain. It doesn't happen to that extent. It can happen to the extent of, hey, maybe it just helps give a little extra push to help this cloud start to rain. It's not going to change. It's not going to create flooding rain. It's not going to change our weather pattern necessarily. I know there's a lot of questions and a lot of cause, a lot of cause for concern for some people on that, but it doesn't happen, and it can't happen to the extent where it causes flooding or mass casualty.
Chase, are you pro cloud seeding?
I don't really know how I feel about it because it doesn't happen where we live, and I don't know enough about it to say whether I'm for it or against it. Does that make sense? I'm also a meteorologist, right? So I'm studying natural weather, so it's hard for me to study. I don't want to say AI. There's been a lot of discussion about that this morning.
AI
but
weather.
Artificially inseminated rain.
Yes.
Until it's not happening here until we get a data center. Then we can talk about whether or not cloud seeding will happen here. Chase Myers, WSIC meteorologist. Thanks for all you do, Chase. We appreciate you keeping us apprised, and we will continue to keep our eyes on tropical storm Erin. She's not yet a hurricane, right?
No.
Not yet a hurricane. Probably will be before the weekend, though.
All right, that's the bet. Make your prop bets now. Chase Myers, WSIC. Thank you so much, sir. We appreciate you stopping by this morning.
Have a good day, guys.
All right, you too. Bill Russell, President of Lake Norman Chamber of Commerce. We'll see what he thinks about all this cloud seeding, all this supine reverse fetal position stuff going on here this morning. The exercise coach, Jerry, will be joining us. Patrick Reynolds, host of the Home Ad Show. If you're going into work, have a great day, my kid.